lack of food and poor water conditions.
On average, every man in the outfit lost half his body weight. I went from 160 to 80 pounds.
Good gracious.
In 4 months. You can imagine what they look like after 6 months.
Now I was reading on the association website where when they could, they would clear landing sites for, I guess they were old Piper J3s or some of those small aircraft to come in.
Yeah.
But they could only take one person at a time.
That's right. Yeah, they were C5s and C7s. They're artillery spotter planes is what they were, with the huge wings. They were all wing and no body, big motor. And they could hover in a 20-mile-an-hour wind, stand still.
Just not go, yeah. Go the wind, yeah.
And let the spotter, keep telling the combat airplanes that were coming, the fighter planes, right where to shoot. We had them help us a couple times. A couple times the smoke, I threw a smoke shell over on this, where they had, on the Jap Marines.
Yes,
I threw a smoke shell over. And with my luck, the wind blew the smoke back, and by the time the planes got there, they machine gunned our perimeter. Fortunately, they only wounded a couple guys.
Now, during the campaign, there was like 5 major assaults
Right.
that you all did.
Yeah.
Can you remember those?
Well, vaguely. I didn't think about that.
That's all right.
The first one, of course, was pretty exciting. There was a wall of boom. That's it. That was the name of it. The word boom means stream.
Okay.
Walla, in this case, was the name of the village. Those natives had a very primitive language. I had an interpreter who was able to sit down and talk to them within 10 minutes, no matter what their dialect was. But anyway, Walla Boom, we put a roadblock on this bridge, and another thing, we killed over 1,000 troops, Jap troops, in that combat. They came at us standing up right across an open rice paddy.
Now the objective was to capture what?
Huh?
I mean, what was the objective during that?
Oh, well, we were blocking our Nietzsche had cut the Japanese communication lines, so they had to use radio. And of course, back in those days, the radios were sort of antique. They couldn't reach out like today.
Right, satellites.
Yeah, so that helped our Chinese troops. They would attack when we sent the word out that we were in position. They would then attack the 18th Division who had participated in the rape of Nanking.
Yes, sir.
And they were pretty tough. They'd had a lot of combat experience all the way through Singapore from up in Japan.
So it was a chance for the Chinese to have their revenge.
Yeah, we had an American group of artillery with them, with a Chinese educated at Harvard, by the way, a Chinese major who was a commanding officer, and they got things done then. They would lose face if they didn't.
Right.
Because we were down maybe 25 to 40 miles behind the Jap lines helping them. And they would have lost face good and proper. So that's the way it worked out. We ran them, after that we went down south. Of course, we were headed south all the way through northern Burma. And we got to a place called Sam Shing Yang, I believe. And we had tremendous roadblock there, and we got into we were near Mogong, which was a fairly good-sized city, and one of the Jap headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
So they had plenty of replacements, and they finally ran us out of there after killing a bunch of the guys. And it became obvious, that's when we got the word from the Air Force that there was a massive group of people coming with elephant carriers and heavy weapons, cannon, to try to cut us off.
Japanese
Yeah,
were coming.
Japanese. That was the brigade of Japanese Marines,
Mm-hmm.
the 6-footers I was telling you about.
So you all had to, you obviously had to pull out.
We had to pull out in a hurry. So the colonel gave me the job as fighting the rear guard. That was a real thrill.
I bet it was.
I had about 15 men to hold the whole Japanese army back, and 2 light machine guns. And of course we had to run like the dickens and then get in position on a bend in the trail. And when any of them showed up, you opened up with that light machine gun, and then you ran like the dickens to the next place. I had the men divided in two pieces. And of course I stayed with the rear section.
Well, that's when you really used the jungle to your advantage.
Oh yeah. And finally, with our luck, some guy got hit in the leg, and we had to improvise our raincoats and shelter halves and cut down some bamboo and make a litter for this guy. He begged us to kill him, mm-hmm. or leave him with a gun, but I wouldn't do it. And he said, "Lieutenant," he said, "you'll get the whole bunch killed." I said, "Maybe not." I said, "Well, we're not going to leave you here to get killed."
Yeah, yeah.
We hauled him out of there, and luckily we got him on that last plane that came in the rice paddy about 5 miles from where he got wounded.
So he got out pretty quick.
Oh yeah.
And you know, compared to.
Oh yeah. He got out. A little plane got out of there full of bullet holes. We found out later.
Really?
Because they had to go right out over the Japs.
Oh, they shot. Okay, they shot the plane up on the way out.
Yeah.
What? I mean, obviously by this time, I mean, you've been there. What you said 3 months a while ago, but I mean, you've been. How long in total were you?
4 months.
4 months.
Yeah, almost to the day. Mm-hmm. Because it was near my birthday in May that the colonel ordered me out because I was in such bad condition that I couldn't hardly walk.
What happened?
Well,
do you mind talking about it?
Oh no. It was just attrition, malnutrition, mm-hmm. to put it bluntly. And see, there wasn't much food value in that stuff, those K rations.
And you, I mean, the conditions you were under, and I mean, you were burning. Well, of course, we know a lot more about nutrition today than we did then. But you were burning all these carbohydrates, and you weren't replenishing them.
Yeah.
Did you get any food out of the jungle?
Well, we I don't know whether I should say this or not, but we ate some of our horses and mules.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I don't want to make people sick.
Yeah. But you had to do what you had to do.
They tasted pretty good, particularly the horses.
Yeah.
They weren't as tough as the mules. But
your condition, you were down to 80
we ate
pounds.
a lot of fish. We would throw hand grenades in the rivers, mm-hmm. and if there were any natives available or around, they would help us catch the fish when they floated over the shallows. We'd break their buoyancy tube or whatever
the bladders,
you call it. Yeah. And they would float to the surface, and then some of them were real big. We ate some of them raw. It was just in combat. You didn't dare build a fire.
Right.
You put enough salt on them, it wasn't bad. Like sushi, I call it now, I think.
we used to use Tabasco sauce.
I think we were the pioneers in the sushi business. But
well, back you were I mean, you were down to 80 pounds.
yeah,
You know, I mean, I'm sure the other troops were too, but you were in bad physical condition.
yeah. Well, the stress was so high.
Because you never got I mean, there was no relief for you. I mean,
No.
you were always under
Night and day.
24/7. You were under stress.
Yeah, we crawled into the bamboo thickets at night, if we could find any, or just laid down on the ground and went to sleep. And of course, you were subject to
Snakes.
bull ants, mosquitoes, and but the worst one, they were a red-colored worm.
Mm-hmm. Was it like a centipede?
No, they were like a slug.
Okay.
They crawl along like a slug, and that's amazing. I never thought I'd forget that name. Boy, they put one guy's eye out. They bored a hole right in his eyeball
While he was sleeping.
while he was sleeping, and didn't even wake him up. That's how tired they got.
Right.
And we had to restrain him the next morning when he found out what happened. He freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to put him in a straitjacket.
What?
A lot
Okay.
of
Go ahead.
Several suicides. They even had a feud on the Lido Road. Two guys got mad at one another, and I never did learn about what, but they stepped off 10 paces back to back and turned around and opened up on one another with automatic weapons. They killed them both, of course.
Yeah.
And
I mean, under those conditions, I mean, you're liable to do anything. The stress,
yeah.
you know. I mean,
Well,
people can't imagine that, but just
Yeah, one guy automatically, we were getting an airdrop the very day that I was talking about going over that mountain behind that mule.
right.
And I was still sick as a horse the following day. That water over there is so polluted you couldn't believe it. But anyway, I was sitting there, and all of a sudden this gun went off. And this kid sitting there, no further than from here across the room, at noon, just finished my lunch, what little I could eat. And he shot his friend right through the hips and punctured his intestines, of course. And they immediately stretched that boy out on they rigged up some bamboo, and some of the parachutes cloth they put over it and laid him on there and opened him up, tried to save his life, but he couldn't. And of course, when he died, his buddy, they had taken his gun away from him because they knew what was going to happen. They knew the guy wasn't going to make it.
Right.
And they knew that kid would kill himself. Sure enough, he had to restrain him.
He shot him on purpose, shot him by accident?
No, accident. He was cleaning the rifle and forgot to remove the one out of the
chamber.
We all carried one under the hammer.
Right.
Because when you needed one, you needed it right then, instantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what kept us going. That's what kept us alive when we ran into them. We always got the jump on them. And we could blow them away before they even had a chance to raise their weapon. That's the way guerrillas operate, by surprise. That's your number one advantage, and you better learn how to use it. That's what those commandos taught us.
And I mean, your poor physical condition, and at that point, I mean, were they going to take you out of combat at that point? Or?
Oh no! You had to be.
You had to stay.
Be in worse shape than that.
Yeah.
Particularly as a commissioned officer, you see, I was a company commander, and later plans and operations officer for the whole battalion. When we got to, in the Battle of Nepumgo, we called it, with those Jap Marines.
Yes, sir.
We were fighting there for 2 weeks, night and day. And by the time we got the 2nd Battalion out of there, only 250 of those men were left able to fight. Half of them were dead, half of them were so badly wounded they couldn't fight anymore, or the stress had gotten them.
Just totally exhausted,
Yeah,
given everything.
yeah.
How many, you had 5 major engagements.
Uh-huh. I was only in 4 of them.
Okay.
And that's when I got the Silver Star. That when we walked into that group of Marines that morning I told you about earlier,
Yes, sir.
I dove off the trail and crawled, my sergeant and myself. And of course they lowered the machine guns and tried to shoot us. But we were crawling down a steep slope in a ravine in the side of this mountain, and they couldn't get the muzzles down far enough to get us. The bullets were pretty, seemed like 5 million of them went over.
If you'd have raised your head, it'd have been all over.
Yeah, you even kept your heels down, crawling with your feet out sideways and flat. But unfortunately, my first sergeant, who was right next to me when it happened, picked up a piece of shrapnel or something from a hand grenade. They started throwing hand grenades because they could hear us crawling. You know, you
Right.
make a lot of noise, particularly in the jungle. He got a piece of shrapnel right across above his eyebrows. And of course, the blood was horrendous. And he sort of freaked out. I didn't even know he was hit because it hadn't hit me. And so I had kept right on crawling, and he stopped when he was hit. So then I had to back up crawling. Try it sometime, backing up crawling. It's really an experience you wouldn't believe. So I got a hold of him, I told him to get a hold of my ankle, and I'll get you out of here. Boy, you know, in the meantime, the hand grenades were landing all around us, and it was really exciting. But I did get him out of there, and unfortunately, it had the frontal wound had affected his memory. It cracked his skull a little bit. And I turned him over to the corporal in charge of the machine gun squad right there at the head of the trail.
Yes, sir.
On the other side of the ravine where our 2 perimeters were set up opposite one another at about 75 yards apart. And so that was when I got the Silver Star for pulling that guy out of there. And then later, another guy got hit when I was trying to direct the mortar fire from just outside of our perimeter. They sent an automatic rifle team down after me. It was pretty stupid of me being out there. But I knew right where I wanted to bring those mortar shells in, because it was the next day after I dragged that guy out of there. And they opened up with an automatic weapon, and they put 12 bullet holes in my pants legs, but never laid a scratch. All I had was a couple of little burns where it burnt the skin.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's a miracle. The
The Lord
man was looking after me.
He sure was.
And my radio operator was over here on the high side, and one of them or 2 of them got him right there below the knee and broke all the bones. And I had to slap it. Oh, I killed those. I killed that automatic rifle team with my carbine. I heard them screaming and thrashing around, so I assumed they were all dead because they quit shooting at me.
That was the main thing.
That's the main thing. And then I had to crawl out of there. The guy was so big, he was my self-appointed bodyguard as well as my radio operator. He was a big ex-steeplejack. I couldn't even budge him. By that time, you know, I was so weak.
Right.
That's when my eyes started dilating all the time.
They stayed dilated even
Yeah.
during the day.
Yeah. Yeah, the medics saw that one night and gave me 2 Nembutal tablets before it put me to sleep. One Nembutal tablet will knock a horse down. I laid down in my slit trench and tried to go to sleep, and they couldn't do it. So I got back up, and they said, "What in the world are you doing up here, Stephen? I'm going to give you another one. Boy, that'll put you to sleep till noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
You look like you need it."
And it did the job?
It did the job. And it's a good thing the Japs didn't attack that night, or I'd have been in Never Land by morning.
Now, you were wounded at one point during the campaign.
Yes, on the Chinwin River. I was on patrol. The colonel had loaned me his horse. Our top officers were all mounted, and he loaned me his horse because I was in such bad shape that he ordered me to check into the hospital until I could snap out of it. That's when my eyes were dilating, and it kind of scared the old man. He kind of favored me a little bit anyway, and so we got into a firefight on the Chinwin River on that trip back up to see General Stilwell and get our new orders for our 5th campaign.
Yes, sir.
And our men were, of course, I'm sorry to say, very belligerent. They had been told by some screwball originally that they were going to just make an appearance once, one appearance for combat to satisfy President Roosevelt. They never told me that.
So you were on the horse when you were shot?
No, I had gotten off because I hate to say this, but the sergeant had sort of cracked up mentally, I mean. And he was talking to the patrol about the possibilities of going back north. And of course I dismounted immediately and tried to talk some sense into him, because that would have been a mortal blow, not only to them, but to Merrill's Marauders, our outfit. And I finally talked them out of it. And then across the river, a group of Japs suddenly appeared going south. And I decided, in view of the situation, the frame of mind they were in, I better go over there and see about it myself.
Right.
Although I didn't even have my carbine with me, I had a .45 under my left arm. I had a holster built by one of the natives over in India. And of course I pulled a pistol out and slid one into firing position with the hammer back, because I thought I was going to get in a firefight any second. You know, I didn't know where they had disappeared, but I didn't know where they were. That trail went down both sides of the river. And lucky for me, when I got over there, they were gone, because I wasn't exactly running to get over there.
Kind of took your time.
Particularly with only a lousy pistol. Geez, you can shoot at the broadside of a barn with a .45 pistol and miss it. But anyway, I got over there, and then I called my patrol over because the open side of the area was open over there, and we had to bed down for the night. It was almost dark, and I called when they all got over there, and the non-commissioned officers got them settled down. There was about 15 or 20 of them. It was a pretty heavy armed patrol, all automatic weapons. And because we didn't know where the Japs were at any time, you know, so you had to be ready. So they got them all set, and I called the non-coms in and for a meeting to place the guard and be sure everything was set. And I forgot that I had put one in the barrel of that 45.
Right.
And we carried the holster way back. And for some reason I'll never understand, I didn't put it back in the shoulder holster, which would have been all right. But I reached back absentmindedly and shoved it down in that rear holster. And the hammer I had put it down on half cock.
Right.
And it caught on the web, pulled the hammer back to 3/4, and when I pushed it down in the holster, it exploded and nearly blew my left leg off. And I had 5 non-commissioned officers standing right there looking at me when it happened, and I was so dumbfounded. I said, "Who fired that shot?" And one of the men said, "I think that was your pistol, Lieutenant."
Well,
And I said, "Couldn't have been." You know, I was so dumb. I went into shock immediately in that weakened condition.
right.
And then all of a sudden it hit me. Boy, I knew I was.
That it was yours.
Yeah. And of course, we had to spend the night. I rode that horse half a day the next day to get to the CIA. We called it the OSS.
Right. Back then.
Back then.
Right.
CIA now. And General Stilwell was there. And of course, we explained what happened to him. And they had radioed out for an evac plane for me, but it had broken down, and it was supposed to have been there by noon the next day when we got there, and it wasn't there. So the general was having a meeting, and when he came out of the meeting, he said, "What are we going to do, Lieutenant, with these orders?" I said, "Give them to the sergeant." And the sergeant took them back to the Colonel Beach. And he said, "What are you still doing here?" I said, "My evac plane broke down."